stepped on another
You
pair.
did?
Yeah.
Wow, what the? That's
Stepped
crazy.
on another pair. Went down, picked him up. There was his glasses.
Wow.
Unbelievably. Like, here they are, son. And he's like, see, Dad? Prayer works. I'm like, I had lost hope.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about praying for these things because there's glasses lost in the ocean.
Yeah, right.
And welcome to another episode of Real Dad's Lead. I'm here, Mr. Dwayne Smith, next to my buddy Matt Hamilton with the glasses on today. So you normally wear contacts. I didn't realize that. I just never seen you with glasses. It's probably the first time.
Really?
I think so.
Interesting.
So why the glasses today?
So have you ever heard of like Forever Chemicals?
No.
So Forever Chemicals, it's in the name, but basically they're chemicals that they last forever. They're perpetually in your body. You can't get rid of them. The question is, where do they come from? I just have, my wife and I have come across this over the last year or so, and realizing that they're in a lot more than we thought.
Yeah.
So basically, there are several companies around the world, including like DuPont. It's probably the one main name that you know. I think that there's about 8 international locations or factories where they produce chemicals. The most well-known one is PFAS, but there's several of these forever chemicals. And essentially, I think that they were discovered initially by like, there was like a spill, and they noticed that this chemical like retracted water, and so they started to put it into all these different products, such as waterproof, you name it, right? But then it got into everything else. Like they purposely are putting in everything else. The problem is that from these plants, a lot of the waste that holds the chemicals has made its way into the adjacent rivers and waterways near these plants. So these forever chemicals are all over the planet now. And you know, this is not some liberal, whatever. This is legit fact. And there's in many areas where these plants are, the adjoining towns, there's an exponentially higher cancer rate, and a lot of like very rare cancers and things like that. So anyway, there's a whole...
I was like, how does this have to do with your glasses?
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, there's a whole movement now. You can find stuff online where their companies are trying to go PFAS free, like trying to get rid of chemicals. There's like only 1 or 2 water filters that are able to get rid of the forever chemicals out of your water, because otherwise you are ingesting it. Okay. And like I said, they're forever, so they stay in your body forever. They've not been able to find out how to get them out of your body except one way, and that only way that they've seen it leave someone's body is through breastfeeding. But then it goes into your baby, and of course it's not an option for men, although in our country, sadly, some have tried. Anyway, that's the only way they've seen it go out. So I mean, if a mother doesn't plan on actually feeding her baby, that's one way that she can get rid of some of the chemicals, interestingly. But otherwise it's always in your body. I just found out recently that at least most contact brands, I've not looked into all of them, but they use PFAS in their contacts. So you are putting that literally into the liquid of your eye all the time. And I've been doing it for over a decade, Okay. So
this is by choice.
This is by choice. Yeah. This is me like, holy smokes, man. Like this stuff is everywhere, and I don't want to put it on my eyeballs anymore. So, I mean, I do it occasionally still. If I'm going to play a sport or something, I'll probably throw them in. But my eyesight isn't terrible either.
Okay.
So, and the reality is too, there's probably some PFAS in these glasses, but I'm not actually putting it into my eyeball. So it's, it's a lesser evil, I guess.
Gotcha. Wow.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting all of that.
Yeah, there's been some major lawsuits against DuPont, and they've actually known it. They've known that these chemicals are dangerous for years prior to it becoming public knowledge. which is why there's lawsuits, and
Okay.
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I was expecting you to just say, my eye was a little irritated, so I wore my glasses today.
Nope.
Or my prescription ran out or something.
My prescription has run out, but that's not why.
Every contact people that I know of, their prescriptions run out. There's very few that
Renew it. Check their eyes as often as they need to.
Like if you get a contacts and you're supposed to change them every month or whatever, or week or whatever the time frame is. It's like, no, I'm just going to keep wearing them until I can't wear them anymore.
For me, day contacts are a month contact. 2 weeks contacts, a couple months.
Yeah.
So they definitely get abused, I'm sure. But
yeah, I don't even know why they say a day, or just to get people to buy more, or are they actually?
Yeah, I think there's probably a bit of that in it.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Well, we're not here to talk about that. We are here to.
But we should look. You should look into PFAS, and so should our listeners. It's a legit thing.
Yeah,
it is very dangerous. Higher, again, it never leaves your body, so it just builds up, and you're running a risk of, more health.
Yeah, this is something recent.
It's come out to public knowledge more in the past couple of years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And more and more companies are becoming aware of it. You can go online and find companies that are purposely trying to create products, even waterproof products, without PFAS
free.
Yeah, or forever chemical free.
You know what PFAS stands for?
I do not.
Well, I had to look into it.
Yeah.
So we have been talking about fathers of the Bible,
mm-hmm.
and we started off with Adam, and then we moved to Noah. I was just going through, just reading through. I don't think there's. They had a lot of genealogy, and to get to Abram, but couldn't really find any steady information about any of them.
Mm.
So I figured Abrams the next guy.
Yeah, just hit the big ones.
Okay, next guy on the list. So I suppose I was at a church, and the pastor was talking about speaking loud on where the Bible speaks loud, and so if it's talking a lot about something, then that's where you spend your time. If it's talking, sometimes we get caught up talking a lot about something that the Bible barely speaks on.
Mm-hmm.
We get trapped into those kind of things. So that's where we're at. Abram at this point. He's not Abraham yet.
That's right.
So we're I thought we'd just do chapter 12. We'll probably hit this for a few podcast sessions. So how does that sound to you?
Sounds great.
Sounds good. All right. Well, let's look at this. Is the Abraham, I think, starts in Genesis 12. So I will. Why don't we just read a little bit of it, and then let's talk about it a little bit. So if you want to read verses 1 through 4,
okay,
then let's go from there.
All right. What version is this? It's the Christian Standard Bible. Okay. All right. The Lord said to Abram, "Go out from your land, your relatives, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse anyone who treats you with contempt, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran.
It's an old man.
Maybe.
My dad.
We talked about this off screen.
My dad just had a birthday. His day is 2 days after mine, and September 11th. And he's turned 76. So I'm just imagining my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I know that ages were different then, but even there, like at this time, their ages are not, the 800, 900 years anymore. Mm-hmm. So, but for him to still be considered a kind of a young guy at 75 is interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some confusion for me on that part. I mean, it obviously says that not long from here that he's an old man, and so it's kind of miraculous that he and Sarah are able to have a child. But he does go on to live to be 175.
Yeah, yeah.
So he lives 100 years past this.
Yeah. So he's not even middle-aged.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I understand that. Well, let's. What do you get from just verse 1?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that came to mind for me is Jesus's words, where he says, essentially, if anybody wants to be my disciple, he must hate his father, his mother, his wife, child, and even his own life, in order to follow me. Right. And that's hyperbole, but it's this idea of, you must be willing to leave everything and everyone.
Right.
Like that's the cost of being my disciple. And I think at the very end of maybe Luke's account of the rich young ruler, where he talks about how, it's difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And he talks about how anybody who leaves wife and children, land, property for my name's sake will, inherit the kingdom of heaven. And Peter's like, we've left everything for you, this is the same kind of concept, it's kind of a type of that later on. In order for Abraham to inherit the promises of God, he had to leave all of this behind and go to a place in faith that he didn't even know where his feet were going to take him. Right. And that's, I think, a really great picture of what we're called to in Christ.
Yeah. Do you have any idea, like, I don't know, when we listen to or read about some of the characters in the Bible where God spoke to them or whatever, Moses was like one of the famous ones, through a burning bush, but when he's speaking to Noah, speaking to Adam, things like that. Do you have any idea how? I don't know. I'm just trying to relate it to myself sometimes. Like, how's God speaking to these people? And he just says, all right. Because sometimes I wonder, is God telling me to do this? Is it myself telling me to do this? Is, why should I just get up, leave everything, and go? Mm-hmm. But I do think that the more you spend time in prayer and in the Word and in your relationship with God, the stronger his voice and the more you will know that it's him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's true, but I think like everything else, there's a danger to it because there's clearly people who think that they're close to the Lord and they're striving to be, and they still confuse their feelings or intuitions or desires with the voice of the Lord, and that that's the case because they try to act on this and it doesn't go very well.
Right.
Or even more blatantly, they say, I heard this from the Lord, and it's flatly contradictory to Scripture.
Yeah.
But they're spending time in prayer. They may even be fasting. Like we see a lot of this in certain segments of Christianity today. So it's kind of subjective still. For Moses, it wasn't very subjective, like that bush is talking to me,
Right.
and it's on fire, not burning up. But for Abraham, I don't know that it says anywhere exactly how he was approached or heard the voice.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that
but it's pretty specific.
Right. Yeah, very specific. So I know that there was a movie that I saw. It was basically I don't know. Did you see it with me? I'm not sure. We saw it together, or you saw it another time. But it was about Abraham and Sarah.
Is that God's son or something? The one that
God's only son,
God's
or his only son.
Yeah, I've not seen it.
Okay,
it's on Angel Studios right now, right?
Yeah, they did a pretty good job of. I mean, they didn't have God speaking to him, but he's telling Sarah that this is God's telling me we got to go do this. Mm-hmm. Sarai. I don't know how do you say her name before she got it changed.
Yeah, people say Sarai and Sarai. Yeah, I think either one's cool.
Yeah, is that what your daughter's named after, or no?
It's a mixture between that and Moriah, Mount Moriah, which is where it was that mountain range where Abraham in chapter 22 goes to sacrifice Isaac.
Okay. So goes to tell her this is what we're supposed to do. She's like, "What are you saying? What? Who's telling you to do this?" There's a little bit of like, a little bit of fight back. Like,
Yeah.
are you sure this is what God's telling you to do?
Which I think implies that it wasn't just an inward intuition that Abraham's, having.
Right.
I feel like he would have needed something a bit more concrete, to make such a decision. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was interesting, the way they portrayed it. So, but I like your point there that he's asking Abram to leave everything. But not everything, because as we'll see, he's taking all his possessions, and he had people, and he had and some other things like that.
Yeah.
So like in verse 2, then verse 2 says, I will make you a great nation and make your name great. So my thought in that was, is that like what people want?
Is that what people want?
Yeah. I mean, as a man, is that like something to strive for? Like, that it seems like people in the, in the world, I mean, those who are very wealthy or very it's those especially who are not necessarily believers, it seems like that's what they're striving for. I want to make a name for myself. I want to be remembered for all time. I want my name to be great, and I want to have all these followers. I want whatever. So, and then even those who are not wealthy or whatever, like if you're on social media or things like that, it's like I want to be popular. I want to make a name for myself. I want people to know who I am, and I want to make an impact, not necessarily a positive or negative impact, but I want people to notice me type thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a natural desire, in that God would say that to Abram and say, hey, I'll make you a great nation. I'll make your name great. That he's like, okay, yeah, I'll leave.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't think Abraham was looking for it. I think the Lord approached him, but I've never thought about this before. I think that what we do want as men, and how this might apply to us, is we don't necessarily need to be made into a great nation, right? But we do want there to be this great line of godly people that comes from us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And in that sense, we want him to bless us. We want our name to be great in that sense. Whether or not they, 10 generations from now they remember our name is kind of irrelevant, because it's not about us. But it's certainly never forgotten to the Lord. And on the other side of eternity, your name will be great, because this godly line starts with you, or is continued, by you. So in that sense, there's a great nation, that comes from us. This great line of godly people.
I've heard a lot
that you will be
of
a blessing to the people. That you and your line, your nation, will be a blessing.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, people who talk about, like, when they're going to school, kids are going to school, and you're like, hey, remember who you're representing. You're representing God. You're representing our family.
Right.
You're representing the Hamilton name or the Smith name, or and you want to carry on that it's a good name. And then people talk about a reputation, like you are ruining the good name of your father, or you're ruining the good name of your forefathers or grandparents or whatever. So there's got to be something to that.
Yeah.
So when I was reading that, I thought, I mean, that's, in general, I think that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want to have not necessarily a nation, but I want to have, like you said, a lineage of godly men, my boys, grandkids, and great grandkids that carry on that godly characteristics.
Yeah. I think that's a really good application.
Yeah.
But it starts with verse 1, where you are obedient to the Lord.
Right.
He's calling you out. Abraham is being called out of an idolatrous nation, right? his father Terah was an idol worshiper, and he is called out from this, and he chooses to leave that behind in order to follow him, right? And so that is the first step. But then the second step is maintaining that distinction, and Hebrews tells us that he did, right? So he leaves the quote-unquote world behind, and he is pursuing a better country, the promises of God, the promised land. And it says that essentially he didn't look back. He didn't think anymore about what he had left behind, because if he did, he'd have opportunity to return. For him, it was a hard line. I'm not going back there. I'm only fixing my eyes on Christ. And because he did that, because he left behind and he maintained that focus, God was able to make of him a great nation and to bless him and to make his name great and have his line be a blessing.
Yeah.
So that is true of us as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think where people go wrong is they try to make their name great. It's God's job to do that, not your job. Your job is to follow and let him do what he wants with your name and your lineage or whatever. But your job is to follow. Your job is to lead and to make sure that those precepts get passed down. But if you're like just trying to pursue a great name on your own, you inevitably will probably fall, or it just will be tainted. I mean, you can have a great name, but it won't be, I mean, in the worldly sense.
Right.
But you won't carry on that godly lineage.
Yeah, right. And that brings up a good question of what does greatness look like scripturally? Because it does look very different from a worldly perspective.
Yeah, it does. But it seems to me when reading Abraham's account is that he had both. To me,
you mean that he messed up? Oh, I see.
No, but it just talks about
he was respected by the nations around him.
Yeah, and he had lots of servants, lots of cattle, all kinds of stuff. So, which we'll get into.
Yeah,
I think so. If we're looking at verse 4, that was interesting to me. I will bless those who bless you, or I'll curse
verse 3.
those.
Yeah,
verse 3.
Yeah.
What does it say again?
I will bless those who bless you, curse anyone who treats you with contempt, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you.
Yeah. I don't know. That's like, okay. I bless those who bless you. Oh, I get that. Curse those who curse you.
Yeah. Does that mean that when some guy gets ticked off at you in his car, you should look over and be like, good luck, buddy?
Exactly. To me, I just read it and I thought, well, what it's saying is God's telling Abram, I got your back. Yeah, I got your back. And yeah, that does make sense to me. Makes sense. I have a hard time with the term cursing others. Like if you are basically, if someone is wishing you bad, that God will wish them bad. To me, I don't know if that's his character. I don't know exactly what it means.
He's certainly just. I mean, you see later on when certain nations have cursed or attempted to curse Israel and they don't repent, he does repay them. I mean, Christ is coming to judge the world in righteousness. Right. You know, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So I do think that is what it means.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. This idea of all the peoples on earth being blessed through you is really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately that's fulfilled in the person of Christ.
Yeah.
Right?
I think most pastors or anything I've heard, that's the blessing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in a way, Moses and the Torah are a blessing to all the world. You know, I mean, it's the Judeo-Christian values that have preserved our nation and led, you know, many nations, you know, in the right way ever since. Yeah. So there's a blessing there, but ultimately it does come through Christ. Every, all the peoples on earth. Some translations say families of the earth. You know, some interpret it ethnicities of the earth, but the idea is
it's not just your line,
right? And so the Gentiles are to be blessed, and the context of this is, just prior to this, the Tower of Babel occurs, and God divides the people up into these nations, and there's a table of nations in chapter 10.
Yeah.
And there's 70 of them, right? And then those go rogue, right? But then God calls out this one man from them and makes of him a nation belonging to God. And through him, through that nation, ultimately,
all those nations.
Yeah, all those nations will be blessed, meaning
yeah.
they'll be brought back into the fold,
Yeah.
right, through Christ, which is why he says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations, right? Yeah, I've broken the power of sin and the demonic and of death. Now go to those nations, tell them that they're free, lead them to repent, baptize them, bring them in. So that's pretty amazing. I think that at least one way this applies to us is that being members of Christ and his body, that's now part of our mission. And it's something that we need to teach our line as well. We're to be a blessing in the one who is ultimately the blessing,
right,
by preaching the gospel, by bringing people into the fold, telling them about Christ.
Yeah.
That's where my mind goes with it.
That's kind of cool. Yeah. I like that. Why don't you read? That was 1 through 4, right? Go ahead and do 5 through 11.
5 through 11. All right. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the site of Shechem at the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him.
Yeah. That answers that question.
From there he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. He built an altar to the Lord there, and he called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram journeyed by stages to the Negev. There was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to stay there for a while, because the famine in the land was severe. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, "Look, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' They will kill me, but let you live. Please say you're my sister, so it will go well for me because of you, and my life will be spared on your account." Do you want to stop there?
Yeah.
That was 13, yeah.
So, heading back to verse 5, I jotted down that Abraham had some bank. All the stuff that he was taking with him. So that's where I was talking about, when, in the New Testament, when Jesus is saying, leave everything, leave your possessions and all this. But in this case, he was like, take your possessions with you. Take all your servants, all your people you've gathered, all your livestock and all that kind of stuff. Take it all with you. So that was why I was saying that, not every time is it just leaving everything, but sometimes the worldly possessions is also a symbol of God's blessing as well. Not always, but
yeah. And that is important to point out. I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. I think we're all too quick in our society to attribute it as being the Lord's blessing.
Yeah.
But that's obviously not true. Just because a church is big and has lots of money doesn't mean God's blessing is on that church.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need to name any names, but there are churches out there where are like, yeah, that's not scriptural, the way that they're doing things. There are other reasons that there are other explanations as to why churches or individuals can be wealthy, right? It doesn't mean it's God's blessing, but in this case it was God's blessing.
I don't know if I'm going to totally agree with you on that or not, but as far as God's blessing, I mean, it can be like a church that is, I mean, I know there are people who have found Christ in churches that other Christians would say are, not under God's blessing. They are, what's the word that Scott always uses? Heretical.
Who's Scott? Your son?
My son, yeah. You heretic. He always says that. Remember did I tell you that?
I don't remember.
One time. He was actually, he heard something on some video. It was like, you heretic. And he would say that. And he would say, Dad, am I a heretic? Dad, are you a heretic? And he's like, Dad, what does heretic mean? And I explained. I said, well, if someone is saying something that's not biblical.
Yeah.
And they're living a life and saying that this is the way God wants it to be, and it's not biblical. That's kind of, if it's not in the Bible, but they're saying that it is, then it's a heretic. And he said, so if basically one time he was playing with his toys and he had one of his toys saying, you should not watch Rick and Morty, Genesis 1:1. Dad, is that heresy?
That's funny. I love Scott.
I said, yeah, I guess it is. Because that's not what Genesis 1:1 says.
So you're saying?
I'm saying that. So in anything, I don't know if this is a Calvinistic view or whatever, but that God can bless something even if they're doing wrong, and can still use that to bring people into His kingdom.
Sure, yeah, but I would distinguish between God is willing and able to use something versus He's blessing it, or versus He's giving them money and whatever.
Well, who would you say is giving them the money?
I'm saying
like on the Calvinistic view, which I don't totally understand or necessarily agree with all of it, but it would be like God's in control of everything, sovereign over all. Mm-hmm. So if a church is growing and getting money and all this stuff, if they're mishandling it or misusing it, that's them. But is God still blessing them?
Has God permitted them to have that money? Of course, He has, for sure.
As a blessing?
Well, I mean, what about how would you explain, for example, cults who have lots of money? Is God blessing them?
Well, I don't know. Is the cult saying it's God or?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
They are?
Yeah. I mean, like, for example, like, this is a Christian podcast, obviously. So we would say Islam is not true. But I have been in plenty of mosques in my day. And when they're doing their building projects, just like we are doing ours, and that money comes in, they praise Allah and say how He's blessed them and because of the good work that they're doing and blah, 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 blah. But you would disagree with that. That's not God blessing them. No, it's not.
Yeah, I'm saying that the Christian God,
Right, but I'm saying that money's coming from somewhere. And just because that money is there doesn't mean it came from God. Or it doesn't mean that it's because God has blessed them.
I have to think about that a little bit more.
Yeah, and we're getting off track.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point. So if you guys who are listening or watching on YouTube, in the comments, what are your thoughts on that? If somebody is being financially rewarded or financially seemingly
if prospering,
is that necessarily God's blessing on them or
right.
or not? So
yeah,
that'd be interesting.
We certainly wouldn't say that's true of everyone in the world, and we can think of very wicked men who have billions and billions and billions of dollars, but that's not God's blessing on their life.
Yeah. And
I'm saying that can just as equally be true of any organization, including a church.
I see.
But on the flip side, where this is practical for us is, it does not mean that every time. It does not mean that if you are not prospering financially, that God's blessing is not on your life, as if you're doing something wrong, right? Because there are theologies out there who are telling you that if you are pleasing to God, if you're walking with the Lord, He will bless you financially, right? That's not a scriptural concept. And I think that that's important to hear, because that really...
He will bless you to...
In other ways, He can bless you.
But He also will bless you financially to what your needs are.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
He may
But
not.
with
He
those,
may not go over and beyond, but
Right,
he
right.
will still bless you, and
He'll
in
meet
fact,
your
he'll
needs.
provide your needs.
Right,
That,
right.
to me, that's a blessing, and it still could be financial.
That's a biblical way of looking at it. I mean, Matthew 6:33. If you seek first my kingdom above all else and live righteously, all these things will be added to you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he says. Meaning, and all these things in context is your basic needs. I'll make sure that you have your basic needs, but there's no promise of abundance.
Right.
But these ministries are saying, no, if you're walking with the Lord, he will bless you with an abundance.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not biblical.
Right.
I think that I'm sure that there are men out there that need to hear that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, if you look at the early church fathers, many of them would say that when wealth is given to a person, it's actually a test from the Lord to see whether or not they will be trustworthy with it, and whether or not they will be generous with it, or rather hoard it. So it's not something we should be looking for, you know, like trying to gain a bunch of wealth and possessions, which is what our society says.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's very interesting. Here, God is choosing to bless Abraham, and in part, it's because he's going to make of Abraham a great nation.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like I said before, it's like the difference between you pursuing it and God giving it to you. It's totally different on that. Okay. What verse was that? That was 5?
Yes.
On verse 7, it talks about him doing altar building. This is the second time that I've we've talked about or read about one of these fathers doing altar building, and
Noah
did also after the flood, the altar building. Just out of curiosity, do you think that there is a modern day equivalent to, if something is significant in your life, or you have this encounter with God, because he said, which you read, that God appeared to him and he had this encounter with him, so he built an altar. Something significant in your life where you would consider, doing something to acknowledge that and to remember it. I would call that altar building. What is there something?
Yeah, I think there are several potential equivalents. I think one is journaling, for example. The idea of many of these altars or like stone piles that the Israelites later do, when they enter the promised land, God's always like, look, in years to come, when you're walking by this place with your son, he says, Father, what is the purpose of stinking scams? What is the purpose? What is the purpose of this pile of stones? You are to remind him of this event. Like that's the point, because you're supposed to pass on to the generations the glories and the wondrous works of God as part of their heritage and as part of their maintaining the faith, right, and trusting him for what's to come, whatever battles they have to go through in their own generation. Yeah. And so that is one thing that our journals can do. I do not keep a journal. It's not the way that I do it.
Yeah.
Another is just maybe reminding people or your family of stories. In a way, that's what the Passover meal was supposed to be. They would recount the story every year. Yeah. This was a memorial or altar, kind of thing for the people of Israel. Yeah. And when we talk about with our kids the glorious things that God has done in the past, that's another way that we can do that. Those are kind of our memorial stones that we're setting up for our family. And if they're in a journal, they're recorded for as long as that journal lasts. I mean, that can be passed on for generations. Yeah.
So I think that as well as communion. I think that's another remembrance type thing. But I'm thinking like a personal, to me, those are, community type things. I'm thinking more of a personal encounter, and to be able to, I think the journaling is a good way to do that. I do know of people, and I am not totally against, but I don't like necessarily the whole thing with the tattoos. but I've seen people who, have had an encounter and they want to get a tattoo basically on their body to do that.
Memorialize it.
So I don't know. Again, if those who are listening, any of you guys have ideas or things that you might do in order to kind of do some altar building, I'd love to hear about it. So, because I see that throughout, and we will see it more as we hit some of these fathers that they do this altar building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good thought.
I'll think through it a little bit more. All right. And then I have verse 11. What do you think about that? This is when Abram is, in my mind, kind of falling.
Yeah.
He's failing. If God told you this is what's going to happen, and I think everyone would do that. I don't know if they would give their wife away, but they would still.
You don't know. I'm pretty sure the answer is no. This is an L for Abram.
But to have a fear, if God is telling you this is what, I suppose, if God is telling you that this is what I'm going to do, and you trust that this is what he's doing, so much trust that I'm just leaving everything, all my family and everything. I'm going to wherever you're going to take me.
Right. Yeah. This is inconsistent.
I'm going to, and then we get to a little roadblock, and you're like, oh, wait a second, maybe something's going to go wrong, and you just basically like, well, they're going to kill me. Mm-hmm. God already said, I'm going to make a great nation out of you and make your name great.
Right.
And you're thinking, Abraham's thinking, they're going to kill me because you're so beautiful. My 65-year-old wife.
Mm-hmm. Again, that's part of my whole thing is like, they weren't that old. I mean, if he's like, babe, you're 65 and hot stuff, the king is going to want to take you. Like that doesn't seem to add up. You know, she's also kind of probably just before midlife. Like maybe she's in her 40s, like the equivalent, you know. Anyway, she's beautiful. Yeah. He compliments her, but then he's like, you're really beautiful and everything, but do me this favor. Tell them that you're my sister.
Yeah.
And it ends up being a half truth.
Yeah.
Right, because she is his half sister.
Yeah.
But it gets him into a lot of trouble. And so I think what you're saying is there's this lapse in his faith, and he's submitting to the fear of men over the fear of God.
Yeah, exactly.
Here.
Yeah. I think I have an understanding of that, because there are times where, if God is asking me to do something, that there's always going to be that fear of man. It's just overcoming that fear of man, because you know what God is telling you to do. That's difficult. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah, you get caught up in the moment. You get caught up in the tangible, the visible, often trumps the invisible. He's walking into a city. It's, a walled city. There's a king. There's a military force here. He's just one man. I mean, he's got his, hired servants and, everything like that. But apparently he didn't think he was any match. If the king decided to take her by force, he'd be done.
You're right.
And so he gets overwhelmed by what he can see and forgets about what he can't see.
Yeah.
And that makes me think of the Elisha and Gehazi story, where Elisha and Gehazi are there inside the walled cities of Jerusalem, and it's surrounded by enemy forces. And Gehazi's like, we're done, And Elisha says, Lord, open his eyes so that he can see. And Gehazi's eyes are open, and he sees the invisible. And there's even greater heavenly forces around.
Yeah.
And he's...
What a great point that we need to take heart of that we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. There are invisible forces that are surrounding us, and the scripture talks about God's for us and who can be against us. I mean, if we are in his will and we are doing his work, should not be afraid of man. It's a lot easier said than done, though.
Yeah, It is, and it
especially in this society right now, where you can just be easily,
maligned.
what do they call it? Like, you're not blacklisted, but you're
Canceled.
Canceled, yeah. And so I kind of went through that with my neighbors. I've got a lot. I don't know if maybe one or two of my neighbors are like Bible believing believers, and like 2 of the households of the 11 that we have. But I'm trying to, start to incorporate myself into my neighbors, and trying to, I just feel the God leading me to kind of do some things that would at least start a relationship that we can talk, things like that. And so, whether I'm organizing a block party or just going around at Christmas time, we go around and we give presents to each of our neighbors, and it'll have something on there about God and blessing them, and or prayer for them or things like that. And so just trying to incorporate some of that in there. And it's scary because I don't want them to just, I don't know, really try just to cancel me, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
I'm always inviting them to our Christmas show or things to that effect too. So, but I understand the fear.
Yeah. Which is why later on in Joshua 1, God says multiple times in one conversation to Joshua, be strong and courageous, for I, the Lord your God, am with you, as he's going in to do the Lord's will, and will certainly face opposition. And he does. He tells him over and over again, I'm with you, remember the invisible,
right?
Greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. That's a really good reminder. So Abraham, early in his faith here, does have this lapse. He loses sight of the invisible. He forgets the promise, essentially, and succumbs to the fear of men and their consequences for it.
Yeah. Consequences and blessing, which throws me for a loop. Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and read, let's just go through like 16 through 20.
16 through 20. Okay. Actually, let's just do, if you're all right, 14, just to continue the story. So when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, so the woman was taken to Pharaoh's household. He treated Abram well because of her, and that's so crazy. Like, I'm just thinking, like, how does Abraham feel at this point? Like, the dude's just taken his wife, and Pharaoh is treating him well, which means at least like he's giving him stuff. He's making sure he's like living comfortably.
Yeah.
What is going through Abram's mind right now?
He's like, man.
And Abram acquired flocks and herds because of this, male and female donkeys, male and female slaves, and camels, which means she was in his household for quite some time.
Yeah.
But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his household with severe plagues because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh sent for Abram and said, "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her as my wife? Now here is your wife. Take her and go." Then Pharaoh gave his men orders about him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had.
Yeah. That's something. I thought the exact same thing. What is Abram thinking when it's like, all right, here, take this. Your sister's so beautiful. Take this. And he's just like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure he had to feel guilty, but not guilty enough to not accept the stuff. I don't know.
It makes me wonder, like, does he know that God's not going to let anything happen?
Yeah. Maybe.
Is this his strategy for getting through Egypt?
Mm-hmm. I don't know.
And he knows that God's just not going to let anything happen.
I don't know.
Similar to when he takes Isaac up, he knows that even if God has him actually die, he's able to raise him back from the dead.
Yeah,
Hebrews
right,
11
right,
says, like, is that what's going on?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because otherwise, this just seems crazy. I mean, totally bonkers.
Yeah, but I jotted down that God protected Sarai, because the king did not, fornicate with her or defile her, because they were struck with this plague or whatever. And I thought God protected Sarai not only from this king, is it Pharaoh? It was a Pharaoh.
Pharaoh.
But also from Abram. He's protected from that.
His error.
Yeah. So.
And this happens again, which makes that's he does this again.
Yeah.
And it's Abimelech.
And his
Abimelech's
son does it
house
too,
is struck with barrenness and whatever,
Yeah.
and he realizes the same. And it's very clear in that text he's not touched her.
Yeah.
Which, for anybody who might find that hard to believe, those kings had tons of wives.
Yes,
Like
right.
it wasn't like, there's probably like a list.
Yeah.
You're on day 365, kind of a thing. So it's really not hard to believe when you consider that. But
Yeah.
she was not touched; she was kept pure. I think that's interesting. I don't know if this is relevant at all to our conversation today, but I do just want to say it because it's a first thought for me. But it's interesting here that 400 years later, Moses is face to face with Pharaoh, with the bride of God, Israel, in Egypt, and Pharaoh's refusing to let her go. But then in the end, he says, "Here she is, take her and go."
Wow. Yeah.
Because that Pharaoh, it took a bit longer for him to kind of break down, right? That 10th plague where the son is killed, the firstborn son. Here, Pharaoh's house is, what did it say? Struck with severe plagues. Okay, so there's plagues again, right? So it's multiple
What a
plagues.
type. That's a great
isn't
find
that interesting?
there from you.
It's very interesting. So this becomes a type of something greater that's going to happen in the future.
I never really put that together. I like that a lot. Interesting. Very interesting. So, does that finish out chapter 12?
It does, yeah.
Yeah. I thought another point, going back to, I can't remember what verse it was, but just when Abram is leaving all of this and taking all of his flocks and all these people with him, I just think that also shows a lot of leadership as a man. It's showing a lot of leadership, because why would all these people follow him? Why in order to take care of all that stuff, he has to organize. He has to. There has to be some kind of I don't know what is the word I'm looking for. Status, some sort of hierarchy of responsibilities, and he's the top of it. So he's like, from what I'm reading, he had a lot of stuff, and he had a lot of people who had to take responsibility of that. So he had to organize that, like the CEO of the Abraham line, or Abraham, I don't know, what do you call it, a farm? I don't know what they were peripatetic, so they were like, nomads or traveling,
You just used a really big word that I've never heard of.
Peripatetic.
Yeah.
Oh.
What does that mean?
It's like a wanderer, or
nomadic.
Go from place to place.
Interesting.
Yeah, I learned that from Perry Mason.
Oh man,
Watching Perry Mason.
Just this little side note: how many times have you seen all of the Perry Masons?
I don't know, probably 15. Wow. Each episode.
It's amazing.
At least. I don't know. That's why I go to bed to. I sleep to Perry Mason. So.
All right. Yeah. So, go ahead. Did you finish your thought on that?
Yeah, just the leadership, and because we're trying to get some, as a father or as a dad or whatever, as a husband.
He's got to manage his household, you're saying.
Thank you. That's what I'm talking about. But it's not in his household because there's no kid yet.
Right.
So his household is all of these servants and
right.
male servants, female servants,
yeah.
and they had a whole big thing.
Yeah.
And at this time, he's got Lot with him too. Is that correct?
Yep.
Right. So and Lot's got a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
So yeah, I just think it's not really just spelled out in the scripture, but just thinking. Obviously, you had to have some kind of leadership in order for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. What would you say are the highlights from this lesson? Or from Abraham so far?
Highlights. I don't know. I've got different types of highlights, things that pop up in my head. I think I told you one of them. I'm just amazed that Sarah was so beautiful that Pharaoh would want her at 65 years old. I don't know, but I think I told you I watched a movie that had an actress in it.
Oh, yeah. She's 65.
She was 65.
Yeah.
And I thought she was pretty.
Yeah. And again, Sarah, I can't remember. I think Sarah lives to be like 135 or something like that. I can't remember.
Well, she had another, same with her, I think. I can't remember if it was her or no, that was someone else. That was Samuel's mom, who had a whole nother 70-some years after he was born. That's who I'm thinking of.
Yeah, but the point is that she was probably around half her lifespan, at this point. Again, so she's about middle age.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's still just.
Yeah,
interesting to me.
So for fathers, though, the highlights, what are the key takeaways from this?
So I think being a man who, number one, follows God above all else,
willing
to leave and be obedient, even if that is something against what you would want to do. Something you got to leave your comfort zone in order to follow God. Then that's what you got to do.
Right. And he left behind family. He left behind normalcy. He left behind the culture that he's always grown up in. So I'm sure friends, maybe some extended family.
Yeah. And like you said, he left it. So he did take all of his stuff, but he had nothing back to go to.
Right. But even in the fact that he left all of his stuff, he wasn't settling anywhere. Hebrews points out that he was content to live in tents instead of settling down because he was looking forward to a better country, right? His eyes were fixed on the promises of God. So he did leave behind the possibility of being rooted anywhere.
Right.
So there was a lot, there was a high cost to this, that he left behind. So again, as men, we need to lead our families in having the attitude of, I'm willing to leave everything, lose everything, if it means gaining Christ and his promises. And I'm to be the example of that to the rest of my family.
Yeah.
And Abraham was. And because he was, God blessed him. And he blessed his line.
Yeah. And because he was a leader, they chose to follow.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, I would have been easily to say, where are we going? We're just going to live in tents?
Yeah, right.
I mean, for him to say this is what we're going to do, and they're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. That's, to me, is a highlight for his leadership. Yeah. So leading well. I think also the altar building. I want to look into that more as far as something I could do, modern day type idea. But
I'm going to come over next week and find mounds scattered in your backyard.
Yeah, piles of wood or mounds, or I don't know. I just know I'll tell you a story that I may have talked about before. I don't know. I think I may have told you before, but there was a time where we were down at Myrtle Beach, and speaking of you wearing glasses today, my son Chad was wearing glasses, and into the ocean. So you would never wear glasses in the ocean, would you? You would always just put your contacts in, or even that, you might just not wear anything.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just sitting there, and he's just sitting at the edge, and the waves are coming from his back and just hitting his back or whatever. And my mind thought, ooh, those glasses might, I just hope they don't fall off, you know. And sure enough, a big wave hit. He went straight down, and his glasses popped off. He's pops up, you know, and that undertow, just whatever. And he's like looking for it. And we had just bought those glasses not that long ago, and they're not cheap. I mean, you're spending over $100 for these things. And so he calls me over. I go over there, and we're like looking for his glasses. And all you can see is whoosh, and whoosh, whoosh, going out, coming in. For those, that's what my hand was doing for those who were not watching YouTube and just listening. My hand's going out and then coming in. And so we're looking for the glasses, and we're just kind of feeling around, and then I step on something that's like, oh, this is not sand.
Interesting.
And I reach down and I grab a pair of glasses.
Aren't they his?
They're not his. They were just sunglasses someone else lost.
What are the chances?
And what are the chances? I'm like, let's say this too. I told Chad, this is the big part of the story, I don't know, I skipped it, that they're gone. You know, they're gone. We lost glasses in the ocean. We're not going to find them.
Yeah, right.
And he said to me, well, why don't we pray about it, Dad? Mm. So he's the one that brought me to the altar. Mm. And then we prayed about it. And then we started doing this search afterwards. And I stepped on the glasses, found the sunglasses. And I thought, well, what are the chances? So we went ahead and did a little bit more. I was looking for them, couldn't find them. Stepped on another pair.
You did?
Yeah.
Wow, what the? That's
Stepped
crazy.
on another pair. Went down, picked them up. There was his glasses.
Wow.
Unbelievably. Like, here they are, son. And he's like, see, Dad? Prayer works. I'm like, I had lost hope.
Yeah.
And wasn't even thinking about praying for these things because there's glasses lost in the ocean.
Yeah, right.
And so the point of that is that I think the altar is I still have those sunglasses. I mean, he took his other glasses, lost them somewhere else sometime, another time.
So it's keeping like little artifacts.
Yeah. And every time I see those sunglasses, I'm reminded of that time where I didn't think of praying, but you know, Chad said we just go and pray about it, and God.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, when my boys turned, I think when they were 14, 15, maybe, I took them on a camping trip and talked to them about becoming men, and got them like it's not exactly a trunk, but I think it's actually like a container for bullets. You know, like one of those big, you know, like a military kind of box. Yeah. But they keep stuff in there that reminds them of certain events, you know, in their life. So I love that idea. That's really good. And we do that for other things, you know, like we do that for Christmas. We get an ornament in the different places that we go, you know, throughout the year, and we remember the trip. Yeah. So you could easily do that with things that the Lord has accomplished in your life. Yeah. And it becomes a box, an altar box of sorts, or a box of altars, of memorials, that you pull it out, and that image reminds you of a certain story. Right. I think that's great.
Yeah. I'm going to put that in a box. I mean, right now it's in a basket, but with a bunch of other stuff that are not memorial.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But, yeah. That was a good episode.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. After I had my birthday and I got a little bit older, though, I could see myself not remembering certain things. I can't remember certain things, but I can remember peripatetic. What's going on with me? I don't know. Well, let's end this episode. Thank you guys for listening and for joining us. And until next time. always remember that real dads lead.